The Council of Echoes. The crystalline sanctum existed outside the normal flow of time, suspended in a pocket of space where stars were born and died in moments. Here the Watchers gathered as they had for 10,000 cycles, their forms ancient and patient, their purpose singular: to observe, to remember, to warn. Moren stood at the center of the chamber, his luminous form flickering with memories of civilizations long turned to dust. Around him, 17 others of his kind waited in silence. They had called this council for one reason, and the weight of it pressed upon them like the gravity of a dying star. "They have been noticed," Moren said, his voice resonating through dimensions. "The young ones. The humans." "Too soon," whispered one of the Watchers. "They have barely left their cradle world." "And yet," Moren replied, pulling forth images that danced in the air between them, "look what they have accomplished in mere centuries. While others took millennia to reach their nearest moon, humans built cities there in decades. While others perfected one path, humans tried 10,000 and learned from every failure." The images showed a red planet, Mars, dotted with gleaming domes. Inside those domes, humans lived, worked, loved, and dreamed. Among them was Sienna Graves, her hands stained with grease as she calibrated a massive atmospheric processor. She wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a smudge across her tan skin, and smiled at her work. The machine hummed to life, breathing oxygen into the thin Martian air. Moren had watched her kind for so long now. He had seen their wars, their hatreds, but also their capacity for change. They were beautifully, terribly persistent. "The Solvarn have taken notice," another Watcher intoned with dread. Far above Mars, in the black between worlds, Lieutenant Marcus Webb guided his interceptor through a routine patrol pattern. He was young by military standards, barely 30, with dark eyes that had seen too much combat in the Belt Wars. His fingers moved across the controls with practiced ease as he scanned the void. "Control, this is Falcon 2, he said into his comm. "Sector 77 clear. Beginning sweep of—" He stopped. His sensors flickered. "Control, I've got unknown contacts. 4. No, 7 contacts. They're big. Really big." The Solvarn had come. In the reptilian warmth of their flagship, General Kethril studied the primitive human settlement below with his cold, vertical pupilled eyes. His scales gleamed like polished bronze in the ship's light. Around him, his officers waited for the command to strike. But first there had been a message, an ancient one, from beings who called themselves Watchers. A warning: do not engage the humans. They are more than they appear. Leave them be, or face consequences beyond your understanding. Kethril had laughed. His officers had laughed. Warnings from beings who never fought, about creatures who still used chemical rockets. Absurd. "Prepare weapons," he ordered. "We will take what we want from their colony. They will learn their place in our empire." Back in the sanctum, Moren felt the decision crystallize across space and time. His form dimmed with sorrow. "They do not listen." "They never listen. Should we intervene?" one of the younger Watchers asked. "No," Moren said softly. "We can only watch. And remember, and when it is over, we will tell the story of what happens when you cage fire." On Mars, Sienna climbed down from her platform and stretched her aching back. The settlement's orange sun was setting, painting the domes in shades of crimson. She checked her data pad and headed toward the mess hall, thinking about a hot shower and maybe, if she was lucky, seeing Marcus when he came off patrol. She had met the pilot 3 months ago when his fighter had emergency landed near her work site. He'd been cocky and irritating, but when she'd helped him jury-rig his damaged engine, she'd caught him watching her with something like admiration. They'd shared coffee, then dinner, then stolen kisses in the observation dome, watching Earth rise over the Martian horizon. Sienna smiled at the memory as she walked through the bustling corridors. Children ran past, laughing. Families gathered for evening meals. Scientists debated theories. It was home, fragile and beautiful and human. The alarm shattered the peace. Red lights flooded the corridors. The public address system crackled to life. All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Unknown hostile vessels entering Mars orbit. Repeat, this is not a drill. Sienna's training kicked in. She ran toward her station, her heart pounding not with fear but with grim determination. Around her, colonists moved with purpose. They had drilled for this. They had always known the universe might not be friendly. High above, Marcus pulled his fighter into a hard turn, his G-suit squeezing his body as acceleration pressed him into his seat. The 7 contacts had multiplied into dozens. Massive ships, each one dwarfing his entire squadron, descended toward the colony like birds of prey. "All fighters form up on me," his squadron leader, Captain Jonas Reeve, ordered. "We hold them off as long as we can. Buy the colony time to evacuate." Marcus armed his weapons, knowing they were hopelessly outmatched. 16 fighters against an invasion fleet. But he thought of Sienna down there, of the families, of the children he'd seen playing in the parks. "Copy that, Captain," Marcus said. "Let's show them what humans do when you threaten our home." He thought of Sienna's smile, of her strong hands fixing impossible problems, of the way she'd looked at him last night when she'd whispered that she loved him. If these were his last moments, at least he'd known that. The Solvarn ships opened fire, and humanity, as the Watchers knew they would, fired back. In the sanctum, Morin watched the first shots of a war that would reshape the galaxy. "It begins," he said softly. "May the universe forgive us for not stopping this." But deep down, he knew the truth the others would learn too late. You could not stop humanity. You could only hope to survive them. First blood on crimson sand. The first missile struck the eastern dome with a sound like the universe tearing apart. Sienna was thrown against the wall of the maintenance tunnel, her ears ringing, her vision swimming with stars that weren't real. Around her, emergency lights flickered, casting everything in hellish red. She pulled herself up, checking her limbs automatically. Everything worked. She could hear screaming in the distance, muffled by the ringing in her ears. Then training took over, pushing panic aside like a door slamming shut on chaos. "Jaren!" she shouted into her comm. Her younger brother worked in hydroponics 3 sectors away. "Jaren, respond!" Static. Then his voice, young and terrified. "Sienna, the dome's breached. We're losing pressure. People are—" The connection cut out. Sienna ran. Her boots pounded against metal floors as another explosion rocked the colony. She grabbed an emergency pressure suit from a locker, sealing it around her body as she moved. The corridors filled with colonists, some helping wounded, others running with children clutched to their chests. An elderly woman fell, and Sienna stopped, hauling her back to her feet. "Get to the core shelters," Sienna told her, then kept running. In the hydroponics bay, she found chaos. The transparent aluminum ceiling had spider-webbed with cracks. Plants lay scattered across the floor, their carefully engineered soil mixing with pooling water and blood. Jaren knelt beside Dr. Amara Osei, the colony's xenobiologist, who pressed her hands against a man's chest, trying to stop the bleeding. "Sienna!" Jaren looked up, his face pale. He was only 19, too young for this. "Help us!" She dropped beside them, adding her pressure to Amara's. The doctor's dark skin was splattered with blood, her usually steady hands shaking. "The medical bay's overrun," Amara said. "We're doing triage here. I need you to—" Another explosion. Closer this time. The ceiling groaned. "Everyone out," Sienna ordered. "This whole section's going to collapse." They lifted the wounded man together, Jaren taking his legs while Sienna and Amara supported his torso. They joined the stream of evacuees heading deeper into the colony's protected core. Behind them, the hydroponics dome imploded with a crystalline scream. Above Mars, Marcus pulled his fighter through a corkscrew, missiles streaking past his canopy. His squadron had been 16 strong. Now they were 9. The Solvarn ships filled the sky like metal mountains, their weapons turning night into day with each volley. "Falcon 2, break left." Captain Reeves' voice crackled over the comm. Marcus obeyed on instinct, and a beam of superheated plasma carved through the space where he'd been. His fighter shuddered as the wash of heat scorched his hull. Warning lights blazed across his console. He was running on fumes and luck, and both were almost gone. "Captain, we can't hold them," Lieutenant Park said, her voice tight with fear. "We need to fall back." "Negative," Reeve replied. "Every second we buy is another life saved down there." Marcus thought of Sienna, wondered if she was still alive, if she was scared, if she was thinking of him. They'd only had 3 months together. 3 months of learning the way she laughed at his bad jokes, the way she fell asleep reading technical manuals, the way she kissed him like she was memorizing the moment. He armed his last 2 missiles and selected a Solvarn cruiser. "For everyone down there," he whispered, and fired. The missiles struck home, and the cruiser's shields flared. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to get its attention. The massive ship turned toward him, weapons charging. Marcus accepted his death, hoping it would mean something. Then something impossible happened. From the surface, a beam of brilliant blue light lanced upward, striking the cruiser's underbelly. The ship staggered in space, its shields collapsing. A second beam followed, then a third. The cruiser began to burn. "What the hell?" Marcus breathed. On the surface, Sienna stood in the colony's central engineering bay, her hands flying across the controls. Around her, engineers worked frantically, rerouting power from every non-essential system. They'd turned the atmospheric processors into weapons, focusing their energy output into coherent beams. It was insane, improvised, and completely human. "Target the next one," she shouted. "Don't let them regroup." The Solvarn had expected surrender. They'd expected panic. Instead, they found humans turning mining lasers, construction equipment, and terraforming tools into instruments of war. Colonists who'd been farmers that morning were now loading makeshift weapons. Scientists calculated firing solutions. Children as young as 10 ran ammunition and supplies. General Kethril watched from his flagship, his scales paling with something he'd never felt before: uncertainty. These creatures fought like they had nothing to lose and everything to prove. They adapted in minutes what should have taken months. They turned every disadvantage into a weapon. "Pull back to defensive positions," he ordered, the words bitter in his mouth. "Reassess." As night fell over Mars, painted in the light of burning ships, the Solvarn withdrew to orbit. They hadn't been defeated, but they'd been stopped. The colonists emerged from shelters to count their dead and tend their wounded. Sienna found Marcus in the landing bay as his damaged fighter limped home. She ran to him as the canopy opened, and he practically fell into her arms. They didn't speak. They just held each other, breathing in the scent of each other's sweat and fear and relief. "I thought I'd lost you," Sienna whispered against his neck. Marcus pulled back just enough to look at her face, memorizing every detail. Then he kissed her, hard and desperate and alive. Around them, pilots and engineers pretended not to notice, but Sienna didn't care. Let them see. Let the whole colony see. Love in the face of death wasn't weakness. It was the most human thing in the universe. When they finally broke apart, Marcus pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Me too," Sienna said. "But we're still here. We're still fighting." In the medical bay, Amara worked through the night, saving lives with steady hands and determined will. Jaren assisted her, learning quickly, growing up in hours. The wounded man they'd saved would live. So would dozens of others. As dawn broke, over Mars, painting the red sand gold, the colony still stood. Damaged, bloodied, but unbroken. And in the crystalline sanctum beyond time, Moren watched with ancient eyes. "They do not break," he said softly. "They never break. The Solvarn would learn this lesson. The galaxy would learn it too. But by then, it would be far too late." The fire, that learned 6 months, changed everything. Admiral Devika Shah stood on the bridge of the EDF Resilience, humanity's first true warship, and studied the tactical display with the focused intensity of a predator. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements practiced and precise. They'd trained for this moment, prepared for it, dreamed of it during the long nights after Mars. "Status?" she asked, her voice carrying the subtle accent of her Mumbai childhood mixed with decades of military command. "All ships report ready, Admiral," her tactical officer replied. "We have fleet positioning on the Solvarn outpost. Defenses are exactly where intelligence said they'd be." Devika allowed herself a small smile. That intelligence had cost lives to obtain, but it would save more. "Execute Maneuver Shiva. All ships engage." The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, appearing around the Solvarn outpost like ghosts materializing from nightmare. 16 ships, each one built from reverse-engineered alien technology and human innovation, each one crewed by people who remembered Mars. The Solvarn had expected humanity to lick their wounds. Instead, they'd built an armada. On Mars, Sienna watched the battle through her datapad, Her engineering team gathered around her in the rebuilt operations center. The screens showed human ships moving with a grace that shouldn't be possible for vessels only 6 months old. Every maneuver, every tactic had been learned from studying Solvarn combat recordings. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology. It was the ability to learn from enemies and adapt faster than anyone thought possible. "They're using the Thacker scatter," one of her engineers breathed in awe. "That's brilliant," Sienna nodded, pride swelling in her chest. The Thacker scatter was named after a pilot who'd accidentally discovered it during a desperate fight in the asteroid belt. Now it was standard doctrine. Human ships spreading out in seemingly random patterns, making targeting solutions nearly impossible, then converging from unexpected angles. Marcus was out there, flying with the Resilience's fighter wing. She'd held him this morning before he left, breathing in the scent of his skin, memorizing the feel of his heartbeat against her chest. They'd made love last night in their small quarters, slow and tender and desperate, knowing it might be the last time. "Come, back to me," she'd whispered, "always." He'd promised. Now she watched his fighter's signature on the display and prayed to gods she wasn't sure she believed in, aboard the Resilience. Marcus led his wing through a killing field of plasma fire and debris. They'd learned to fly in 3 dimensions now, not just the flat plane instinct demanded. They'd learned to trust their instruments when their eyes lied. They'd learned that the vacuum of space cared nothing for courage, only physics and will. "Falcon Wing, hard burn on my mark." Captain Reeves' voice came through, steady as always. He'd become more than a squadron leader. He'd become Marcus's mentor, teaching him that leadership meant carrying the weight of every life lost and every victory won. "Mark." Marcus slammed his throttle forward and his fighter screamed toward a Solvarn destroyer. Missiles away. Impact. The destroyer's shields flickered, and he was already banking away, letting his wingman follow up with railgun fire. They worked like a machine, like an organism, like humanity always did when pushed to the edge. In the heart of the Solvarn outpost, General Torvan watched his defensive perimeter collapse with growing horror. He'd studied the humans after Mars, had read every report, had convinced himself they'd simply gotten lucky. Now he understood the terrible truth. Humans didn't get lucky. They made luck irrelevant through sheer persistence. His communications officer turned to him, scales pale with fear. "General, they've breached the outer ring. Casualties are..." An explosion rocked the command center. Alarms shrieked. Through the viewport, Torvan saw a human ship ramming his carrier's shield generators, sacrificing itself to create an opening for the rest of the fleet. They fight like madness given form, he thought. How do you defeat an enemy that weaponizes its own mortality? On a distant world in chambers filled with the soft clicking of mandibles and the sweet smell of pollen, Nisara watched the same battle unfold. Her compound eyes tracked the human movements with growing fascination. The Veltron had always been traitors, diplomats, survivors through negotiation rather than force. But these humans, they survived through something else entirely, something that made her thorax tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. Her queen had ordered all Velthran worlds to support the Solvarn coalition. To Nisara, that suddenly seemed like the worst mistake her people had ever made. She thought of the human prisoners she'd seen in the detention centers, the ones who'd been captured after Mars. They'd been offered comfortable captivity in exchange for information. Every single one had chosen death, not out of stupidity. Not out of ignorance, but because they believed so completely in their cause, in their people, in their right to exist freely, that death was preferable to betrayal. Nisara had never understood that kind of conviction, until now. She opened a secure communication channel, encrypting it with codes she shouldn't possess. "Dr. Amara Ose," she said carefully into the void, hoping the human xenobiologist would receive her message. "I wish to speak with you, not as enemies, but as 2 beings who might understand each other." In the Mars Medical Center, Amara's datapad chimed with an impossible message. She stared at it for a long moment, her mind racing through possibilities. It could be a trap. It probably was a trap, but what if it wasn't? She typed a careful response. "I'm listening." Above the Solvarn outpost, the battle reached its crescendo. Admiral Devika gave the final order. "All ships, full assault. Show them what humans do when you attack our homes." The fleet converged. Marcus and his wing punched through the last defensive line. Sienna watched from Mars, her hands gripping the edge of her console so hard her knuckles went white. And then it was over. The Solvarn outpost went dark, its reactors offline, its weapons silent. General Torvin transmitted his surrender, the first time in his species' history they'd ever yielded to an inferior force. Except humanity wasn't inferior. They'd just learned faster. When Marcus's fighter landed back on the Resilience 12 hours later, Sienna was waiting. She'd taken a transport up, unable to bear the distance any longer. She ran to him across the landing bay, and he caught her, lifting her off her feet, spinning her around. "You came back," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I promised," Marcus replied, setting her down gently. "I'll always come back to you." They walked together to the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Earth hung in the distance, beautiful and blue and home. Marcus took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Sienna turned to him, eyes wide. "What? Marry me," he repeated. "I don't know what tomorrow brings, but I know I want to face it with you. As your husband, as your partner, as the man who loves you more than stars and space and survival itself." Sienna laughed through her tears and pulled him into a kiss that tasted like salt and joy and forever. When they broke apart, she whispered, "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." That night, in Marcus's small quarters aboard the Resilience, they made love with the urgency of people who understood how fragile life was. Sienna traced the scars on his chest, each one a story of survival. Marcus kissed every inch of her skin like worship. And when they finally lay tangled together, breathless and complete, watching Earth turn slowly outside the viewport, they understood what the Watchers had always known. Humanity's strength wasn't in weapons or ships or even intelligence. It was in this, in love, in connection, in the unbreakable bonds between souls that refused to surrender. In the crystalline sanctum, Moren watched and wept tears of light. "The galaxy will never understand them," he said, "and that is why humanity will prevail." When empires tremble 3 years of war had redrawn the galactic map, Empress Valindra of the Athari Collective stood before the Grand Council, her feathered crest raised in imperial displeasure. Around her, representatives from 17 species waited in the vast chamber, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some saw invisible light, others in electromagnetic spectrums humans couldn't imagine. But they all shared one thing now: fear of humanity. "The humans have taken the Kepler cluster," Valindra announced, her voice carrying the musical quality of her avian species. 12 systems, 12, in less than a standard cycle. The Solvarn held those worlds for 3 centuries. They don't fight like civilized species, growled Ambassador Threnix of the Mortal Pact. His crystalline form refracted the chamber's light into angry rainbows. They use tactics that violate every convention of warfare. They use tactics that win, corrected Trade Minister Nisera quietly. Every head turned toward her. The Velthron diplomat had become increasingly vocal in her defense of humanity, much to her queen's displeasure. Beside her, connected via holographic link, Dr. Amara Ose sat in her human diplomatic attire, her expression carefully neutral. The relationship between Nisera and Amara had grown over 3 years of secret communications, evolving from curiosity to understanding to something neither of them had words for. They spoke every day now, sharing insights about their peoples, their hopes, their fears. Amara had taught Nisera about human literature. Nisera had introduced Amara to Velthron philosophy. They were, in the way of their species, falling in love. "Minister Nisera," Valindra said coldly, "your sympathy for the humans is noted and concerning." "My sympathy," Nisera replied, her mandibles clicking with emphasis, "is based on observation. We initiated hostilities. The humans responded. Now we cannot stop what we started, and rather than admit our mistake, we call them uncivilized." "They refuse to negotiate," Threnix protested. Amara spoke up, her voice carrying diplomatic calm over a core of steel. "We've offered to negotiate 17 times. Each offer required humanity to surrender conquered territories, submit to oversight councils, and limit our expansion. Tell me, Ambassador Threnix, would your people accept such terms?" Silence fell over the chamber. "The Watchers warned us," Nisera said softly. 3 years ago they warned us. We laughed. Now our laughter has turned to screams. Valindra's crest flattened against her skull. Then what do you propose? Surrender. I propose, Nisara said, that we acknowledge reality. Humanity cannot be defeated through force. Every battle makes them stronger. Every loss teaches them lessons. We either coexist with them, or we perish opposing them. In the shadows of the council chamber, Moren watched, invisible to all but those who knew to look. He had spoken before this body 3 years ago. They had dismissed him. Now perhaps they would listen, but it was too late. The war had gained momentum that no words could stop, on Earth. In the underground command center that humanity had built deep beneath the Himalayas, Commander Reese Chen studied the holographic display of enemy positions. He was 43, scarred, and possessed the kind of cold efficiency that came from 2 decades of special operations. The coalition is massing, he said to his assembled team. Intelligence suggests they're planning a major offensive. Maybe their last one. His second in command, a woman named Victoria Kowalski, leaned forward. Target? Sol system, Reese replied. They're coming for Earth. The room fell silent. After 3 years of fighting in distant systems, the war was coming home. How long do we have? Victoria asked. 6 weeks, maybe 8. Reese thought about his daughter, safe in the New Zealand shelters. She was 10 now, had never known peace, had grown up with war as her lullaby. He'd missed her last 3 birthdays. He'd promised her he'd make the next one. Now he wasn't sure he'd survive to keep that promise. Prep the Orion protocol, he ordered. If they're coming to our home, we'll make them regret every light year of the journey. Aboard the Resilience, now serving as humanity's flagship, Admiral Devika Shah received the same intelligence. She stood in her ready room, looking at pictures on her desk, her parents gone now, her sister's family in Delhi, her nephew who'd died at Mars. Marcus Webb entered without knocking, his captain's insignia gleaming on his collar. He'd been promoted twice in 3 years, his squadron's kill count legendary. But the promotion he cared about most was being named Sienna's husband. You wanted to see me, Admiral? Marcus, Devika said, setting down her coffee. How's your wife? Pregnant, Marcus said, unable to keep the smile off his face. 3 months. We found out yesterday, Devika's expression softened. Congratulations. In the middle of war, we make life. That's very human of you. Sienna says if we're going to survive, we need things worth surviving for. Marcus's smile faded. The coalition is coming, isn't it? Yes, Devika pulled up the tactical display. Everything they have. One final push to break us. If they fail, they'll have to sue for peace. If they succeed, they won't, Marcus said with absolute certainty. They can't. I wish I had your confidence. It's not confidence, Admiral. It's marriage. I have a wife I love and a child on the way. I'll die 1,000 times before I let them take that from me. He met her eyes. Multiply that by every human in this fleet, every person on Earth, and you'll understand why we can't lose. Devika nodded slowly. Captain Reeve has recommended you for wing commander of the entire fighter corps. I'm approving it. When the coalition comes, you'll lead 5,000 fighters against their armada. Marcus felt the weight settle on his shoulders. 5,000 pilots. 5,000 lives. But he thought of Sienna's smile, of the child growing in her womb, of every human who deserved to see tomorrow. I'm honored, Admiral. Don't be honored, Devika said. Be ready. That night, Marcus found Sienna in their quarters aboard the Resilience. She'd become the chief engineer for the entire fleet. Her innovations in ship design and energy systems keeping humanity's vessels competitive with more advanced alien technology. She looked up from her datapad as he entered, and her face lit up in the way that still made his heart skip. He crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair and placing his hand on her still flat stomach. Hey there, little one, he whispered. Your dad here. Just wanted to let you know you're coming into a complicated universe. But your mom and I, we're going to make sure it's a universe worth living in. Sienna ran her fingers through his hair, tears streaming down her face. They're coming for Earth. I know. Promise me you'll survive. Marcus looked up at her, seeing the fear and love warring in her eyes. I promise I'll fight like hell. That's all any of us can promise. Sienna pulled him up, kissed him desperately, and they made love with the fierce urgency of people who understood that tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, he replied. More than anything. more than life itself. In the diplomatic chambers on Mars, Nisara and Amara sat together, sharing a meal in the careful way of beings learning each other's customs. Amara used chopsticks to eat Velthran nectar cakes. Nisara attempted to drink human tea without her mandibles getting in the way. They'd never touched, separated by biology and custom, but the connection between them was undeniable. They finished each other's thoughts. They understood each other's silences. They had become something more than friends, something their peoples didn't have words for. When the battle comes, Nisara said quietly, I will stand with humanity. Your people will call you traitor. Let them. Nisara's compound eyes reflected the light like jewels. I've learned something from you, Amara. I've learned that conviction matters more than comfort, that some things are worth sacrificing everything for. Amara reached out, stopping just short of touching Nisara's chitinous hand. I wish we'd met in peacetime. I wish I could show you Earth, the oceans, the forests, all the beautiful things my people are fighting to protect. If we survive, Nisara said, you will. In the crystalline sanctum, Morin gathered his fellow watchers. The final test approaches. The Coalition brings everything against humanity's homeworld. This will determine the shape of the galaxy for the next 10,000 cycles. What do you foresee? One of the younger watchers asked. Morin's ancient form flickered with images of possible futures. In some, Earth burned. In others, humanity stood triumphant. In all of them, the galaxy would never be the same. I foresee, he said slowly, that the universe is about to learn what happens when you threaten a species that refuses to surrender. The Coalition comes with 10,000 ships. Humanity has 3,000. By every measure, humanity should fall. But they won't, another watcher concluded. No, Morin agreed. They won't, because the Coalition fights for territory and pride. Humanity fights for home, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a Coalition armada numbering 10,000 warships began its journey toward Sol System. At its head, Empress Valindra stood on her flagship's bridge, her crest raised in determination. We end this, she declared. We end humanity's rebellion. We remind the galaxy who rules the stars. But in her heart, for the first time in her long reign, she felt doubt. The Watchers had been right once. What if they were right again? The Age of Defiance. The fleet came like a metal tide, blotting out the stars. 10,000 warships emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol System, their combined mass enough to be detected by gravitational sensors on Earth. On every human world, in every colony and station, alarms sounded. This was the moment humanity had prepared for, feared, and accepted as inevitable. Admiral Devika Shah stood on the Resilience's bridge, watching the tactical display paint their doom in cold, precise numbers. 3,000 human ships against 10,000. The numbers didn't add up. They never had. But numbers had never beaten humanity before. All ships, battle formation Omega, she commanded, her voice carrying across the fleet through quantum-encrypted channels. Fighters, launch when ready. Defense platforms, full activation. Every gun, every missile, every ounce of hate we have. Show them what humans do when you come for our home. Across the fleet, 3,000 captains acknowledged her order. In the fighter bays, pilots climbed into their cockpits, checking weapons one final time. Marcus Webb, now wing commander of all human fighter forces, sat in his command fighter and looked at the picture of Sienna he kept on his console. She was 7 months pregnant now, safely in the deep Earth bunkers with the other non-combatants. Before he'd left, she'd held him so tightly he could barely breathe. Come back to me, she'd whispered, the same words as always. Always, he'd replied, the same promise. Except this time they both knew it might be a lie. All wings, this is Commander Webb, Marcus said into the fleet-wide channel. You've all heard the numbers. You've all done the math. We're outnumbered 3-1. Our ships are smaller, our weapons weaker, our tech inferior. He paused, letting the weight of truth settle. But we have something they don't. We have home behind us. We have families to protect. We have a future to build. And we have a choice. Die on our knees, or die on our feet, making the bastards regret they ever heard the word human. 5,000 voices roared back their answer. The fighters launched, streaming from carriers like swarms of angry hornets, filling the space between Earth and its attackers. On the Coalition flagship, Empress Valindra watched the human fleet deploy with growing unease. She'd studied every battle, every tactic, every human victory. She knew what they were capable of, but knowing and accepting were different things. "They're not retreating," her tactical officer observed, avian voice high with stress. "They're advancing." "Of course they are," Valindra said softly. "They always advance." Behind the coalition fleet, in a small unmarked ship, General Torvek of the Solvarn watched with scales pale as ice. He'd requested to observe this battle, to see the final defeat of humanity. But after 3 years of losses, after watching his people's empire crumble, he no longer believed in final defeats where humans were concerned. The battle began. Human fighters hit the coalition vanguard like a hammer striking glass. They didn't try to dogfight where they were outmatched. Instead, they swarmed, dozens of fighters targeting single capital ships, overloading shields through sheer volume of fire. It was costly, suicidal even. Fighters died by the hundreds, but capital ships died too. Marcus led his wing straight into the teeth of the enemy formation, dodging plasma fire that could vaporize his fighter in microseconds. He'd lost Captain Reeve 2 months ago, had held the man as he died, had promised to carry forward everything he'd taught. Now Marcus flew with that promise like armor around his heart. "All fighters maneuver, Chen," he ordered, named after Commander Reese Chen's last successful action before he'd died taking an enemy command ship. 3, 2, 1, break! The human fighters scattered in programmed chaos, and the coalition ships fired on empty space. Before they could recalculate, the fighters converged from new angles, missiles away, railguns firing. 2 cruisers died in fire, but the coalition kept coming. They had numbers, and numbers told. Aboard the Resilience, Sienna's brother Jaren worked the tactical console, coordinating point defense systems. He was 22 now, hardened by war, no longer the scared kid from Mars. When a coalition battleship broke through the defensive line and launched a missile strike at Earth itself, Jaren didn't hesitate. "Intercepting," he said, and fired. The missiles died kilometers from Earth's atmosphere, but 3 human defense satellites died with them. Jaren watched the icons blink out and felt the weight of those lives settle on his soul. On Mars, in the command center she'd helped build, Sienna monitored power levels across the fleet. At 7 months pregnant, she was supposed to be in the shelters. Instead, she worked because sitting idle would have killed her faster than any bomb. "Resilience is down to 40% power," she said into her comm. "Diverting emergency reserves from manufacturing stations." A hand touched her shoulder. She looked up to find Dr. Amara Osi beside her, exhausted but determined. "You should be resting," Amara said. "So should you," Sienna replied. "But we're human. We don't know how to rest when people need us." Beside Amara, Nisara stood in her first human-made environment suit. The Velthron had arrived on Mars 3 days ago, defecting completely from her people, bringing intelligence about coalition command structures. Her queen had declared her dead. The coalition had declared her traitor. She didn't care. She'd chosen her side. "The coalition center is wavering," Nisara observed, studying the tactical display with compound eyes that saw patterns humans missed. "They expected to break you by now. Your resistance is shattering their morale." "Good," Sienna said grimly, then gasped as pain lanced through her belly. "Sienna?" Amara was instantly professional, medical training taking over. "I'm fine," Sienna said through gritted teeth. "Just stress contractions. I'm fine." But Amara had already pulled up Sienna's medical data. "Your blood pressure's spiking. You need to get to medical." "I need to keep this fleet powered," Sienna argued. "You need to keep that baby safe," Amara countered. "Let me take over here." Nisara's mandibles clicked in what Sienna had learned was Velthron agreement. "Go. We will hold your station." Reluctantly, Sienna let Amara help her toward medical. As they walked, another contraction hit harder this time. Through the viewport, she could see the flashes of battle, could imagine Marcus out there dodging death, could feel the weight of all humanity pressing down on this single moment. "He'll come back," Amara said softly, reading her thoughts. "Marcus always comes back." In space, Marcus dove through a debris field of shattered ships, coalition and human alike. His fighter had taken hits, his shields were at 20%, and he was down to his last missile. Around him, his wing had been reduced to 1/3 of its original strength, but they destroyed 100 coalition ships. He thought of Sienna, of the child about to be born, of the future that hung in the balance of this battle. Then he saw it, the coalition flagship, Empress Valindra's personal vessel, its shields flickering from sustained assault. "All wings converge on the flagship," Marcus ordered. "We take out their command, we win this." What was left of his fighter corps rallied to him. They streaked toward the flagship like falling stars, and Marcus armed his last missile, painting the target, accepting that he might not survive the run. Then the universe shifted. From deeper in Sol system, from beyond Jupiter's orbit, a new fleet emerged. Not human, not coalition. These ships glowed with impossible energy, their forms beautiful and terrible, their presence like a note of music in the key of existence itself. The Watchers had come. Morin's voice echoed across every communication channel, in every language, in every mind capable of receiving it. Enough. "This ends now." On the coalition flagship, Empress Valindra stared at the newcomers with wide, terrified eyes. The Watchers hadn't intervened in galactic affairs in 10,000 cycles. Their appearance now meant something fundamental had changed. "Humanity has passed their trial," Morin declared. "They have proven what we knew they would, that perseverance overcomes power, that will defeats weapons, that the human spirit cannot be broken. This war is over. We will not surrender to—" Valindra began. "You misunderstand," Morin interrupted, and his voice carried infinite patience and infinite finality.